My name is Ava Thompson. I am 32 years old. The night my brother called to tell me I had no place at his wedding was the night I finally stopped waiting for people who had never truly seen me. He said it quickly, almost casually, like he was canceling lunch plans rather than cutting his own sister out of a celebration being held inside the $572,000 house I had purchased for him. I remember sitting in downtown Columbus traffic, reading that message over and over, trying to figure out which part hurt more, the words themselves, or how little effort it took him to say them. My parents supported him, naturally. They told me the guest list was too small. They said the bride's family had to come first. They said I was overreacting. What not a single one of them understood was that the home they were filling with white roses, golden candles, and imported champagne still legally belonged to me. And while they prepared to celebrate my brother's fresh start, I was sitting across from a lawyer, signing documents that would permanently end the comfortable lie they had all been living inside. The cruelest part was never the exclusion itself. It was their absolute certainty that I would continue loving them quietly and endlessly, no matter what they did. They were convinced I would keep giving, keep stepping aside, keep absorbing every wound, because that had always been my assigned role in this family. They were completely wrong, because before that wedding night ended, the house would no longer belong to my brother. My father would lose the last illusion he had ever used to control me. And the bride, the woman they believed was stepping into a flawless family, would be the one who brought an entire room to silence. My mother's name was Ava Thompson, and she was the last truly fair person in our household. While she was alive, fairness had a shape and a structure. My brother Ethan received help with schoolwork, and so did I. He got a birthday dinner at his favorite restaurant, and so did I. He was celebrated when he worked hard, and so was I. Then cancer took her in October, when I was 14 years old, and our family split apart before the casseroles neighbors brought had even been cleared from the kitchen. Ethan was 16, tall and easy in a room, already learning how effortless life could be when people handed him the spotlight. My father, Richard Thompson, loved him the way certain men love a legacy, openly, loudly, and without any real self-reflection. Me, he loved in theory. In practice, I became the child who could handle it. My mother's closest friend, Maria Callahan, found me after the funeral, standing alone near the back of the church. She held my face in both hands and said, "Your mother made me promise I would never let you disappear." At 14, I assumed she meant emotionally. Years later, I discovered that Elena had signed actual guardianship and trust documents in her final weeks because she did not trust what would happen to me once she was gone. She had recognized the imbalance in our family long before I had the language to name it. The years that followed were an education in being treated like background furniture. Ethan received a car at 16. I was told the bus was still running. His bedroom was repainted twice. I wore a winter coat with a broken zipper for 3 months because requesting a replacement felt like asking a favor from someone who had already decided I wasn't worth the expense. One evening during high school, I asked my father for textbook money, and he said, without looking away from the television, "Ask your brother." I already gave him the budget. The budget, like our childhood, was a department. He was the manager, and he had already decided which employee mattered more. I started working breakfast shifts at a diner outside Columbus before school began each morning. At 16, I was pouring coffee for truck drivers at 5 in the morning, arriving to class with grease in my hair, and studying late at night while my brother attended golf lessons my father paid for without a second thought. The hardest part was never the struggle itself. It was how efficiently I learned to convince myself it was normal. On my 17th birthday, my father forgot to come home for dinner because he was at Ethan's baseball banquet. On my high school graduation day, he arrived 40 minutes late and immediately asked whether I could move my boxes from the hallway before Ethan's friends came over. The photographs from that period say everything. In one, I'm holding an honor cord, squinting in the sunlight. In another, posted that same afternoon on my father's social media, Ethan stands beside him at a sports bar with the caption, "Proud of my boy." That became the rhythm of my entire life. At 19, when I made Dean's List, no one called. At 21, when I passed my licensing exam, my father left a voicemail 6 days afterward that opened with a quick question about a lender for Ethan's car refinancing. At 23, when I closed my first real estate deal, Maria brought cupcakes to my apartment while my father posted photographs from Ethan's weekend getaway. At 26, when I reached my first six-figure year in Columbus real estate, I opened my phone to find my father sharing Ethan's latest promotion with the caption, "Sons carry the family forward." Once, after too much bourbon at a 4th of July gathering, he said the quiet part out loud. "Daughters are easier," he told a friend while I stood 6 feet away holding a tray of paper plates. "Sons are the future." I don't think he registered that I heard him. Or perhaps he did and simply assumed I would do what I had always done, swallow it, smile, and clean up afterward. There were nights I came close to giving up entirely. Ohio winters are punishing when you are young and underfunded and too stubborn to reach for help. I lived above a laundromat for 2 years, slept with a space heater humming beside the bed, and learned to budget by calculating which bill could survive being delayed. Maria offered me money more than once. Each time, I pushed the envelope back across her kitchen table because I needed to know that whatever I became would truly be mine, not borrowed, not gifted, not something someone else could take credit for later. I told myself that success would rewrite the story, that if I worked long enough and built enough and earned enough, they would eventually have to acknowledge me. That competence would somehow translate into love. Instead, success only made me useful. The more stable I became, the more my family looked at me the way people look at a generator during a blackout, not as a person, but as a resource. The call came when I was 29. My father had not reached out in nearly 3 years. No birthday message, no holiday invitation, no simple check-in. Then one Wednesday afternoon, his name appeared on my phone as though no time had passed at all. "Your brother needs a real place," he said within 30 seconds. "He is serious about a girl from a good family. Renting doesn't project stability. Help him out, not would you consider it? Not if you're able. Just help him out," as though I were being asked to pick up something from a grocery store. The woman was Brooke Harrington, daughter of a prominent Columbus family with country club memberships, board positions, and the kind of refined social influence my father had always admired from a careful distance. I understood exactly what he wanted. Ethan needed a more impressive stage. I was expected to fund the scenery. There is a particular kind of humiliation in realizing that the first moment your family genuinely believes in your financial success is the moment they can redirect it towards someone else. I wish I could say I laughed and ended the call. I didn't. Some bruised part of me still hoped for a miracle. Maybe one large enough gesture would finally change the math. Maybe if I gave my brother a house, I would stop being the daughter who had built everything alone and become the daughter they were proud to claim. So I purchased a 4-bedroom colonial in Dublin, Ohio. A deep backyard, a renovated kitchen, and enough polished charm to impress people who equated granite countertops with character. The price was $572,000. I paid in cash. I kept the deed in my name, which was the only sound decision I made throughout that entire process. That happened because Maria sat across from me at dinner, narrowed her eyes, and said, "If you are determined to do something this reckless, at least do not surrender legal reality along with your emotional dignity." She made copies of every document and locked one set in her personal safe. Ethan moved in a week later. He hugged me in the driveway, called me the best sister in the world, and never once asked why none of the paperwork carried his name. Looking back, that should have told me absolutely everything. At first, the erasure was gentle enough to rationalize. Thanksgiving was small that year. Christmas was at Brooke's family home because they had already made all the arrangements. My father's birthday dinner was for immediate people only. Then the omissions became visual. On the 4th of July, I drove past the house on the way to a client appointment and saw Ethan in the yard grilling under a large banner reading "New Home," with Brooke's friends photographing everything, and my father laughing on the patio as though he had personally laid every brick. Nobody had invited me to the housewarming party for the house I had purchased. A month later, passing the street again by chance, I saw a Harrington family vehicle in the driveway, catered trays visible through the front windows, and Ethan on the porch telling a group of guests that Brooke really made this place feel like ours. That word did something quiet and ugly inside me, not because I wanted loud public recognition, but because I understood he was speaking ownership into existence, repeating it until everyone around him simply accepted it as fact. Then came the social editing. Brooke posted a Christmas photograph from the staircase I had chosen at closing because it reminded me of the kind of warm home my mother would have loved. In the caption, she wrote, "Just a quiet family holiday in our home." My father commented with a heart and the words, "So proud of the life you two are building." My name appeared nowhere in the post, nowhere in the comments, nowhere in the story of how that home came to exist. A mutual friend later sent me a screenshot of Ethan on social media, responding to a college friend who asked how he managed to buy property so young. "Family helped," Ethan had written. "Dad made it happen." I stared at that sentence until my screen went dark. He had not only removed me from the story, he had reassigned my sacrifice to the one person who had spent half my childhood ensuring I understood I ranked second. The deepest wound arrived through something almost embarrassingly small. I had once chosen a navy front door wreath for that house because Ethan mentioned Brooke preferred understated decor. The following autumn, I drove past and saw she had replaced it with a monogram wreath bearing the initials H and T for Harrington and Thompson. Not Ava, not even something neutral. A symbol, literal and public, declaring exactly who belonged in that home and who did not. The lie finally cracked open because of a phone call from a colleague named Jenna Morales. Jenna had worked enough Columbus closings with me to understand the difference between idle gossip and information someone had a genuine right to hear. "Ava, this is awkward," she said one evening, "but a man I'm fairly certain is your brother has been asking a real estate attorney about a quitclaim deed and long-term ownership claims on an occupied property." I went completely cold. A quitclaim deed meant Ethan was no longer satisfied with acting like the house belonged to him. He wanted the paperwork to catch up with the lie. I thanked Jenna, said almost nothing else, then drove directly to Maria's house. She listened without interrupting, then disappeared into her office and returned with my complete file. Deed, tax receipts, insurance records, every proof of ownership in perfect order. "Your mother did not leave me all this paperwork because she trusted your father to do the right thing," she said quietly. She left it because she knew he might not. That was the night Maria finally showed me the guardianship instructions my mother had signed. In the margin beside my name, Elena had written in her own handwriting, "She will try to earn love by overgiving. Don't let that destroy her." I had to sit down after reading it. My mother had predicted me with terrifying accuracy. What followed was not one dramatic discovery, but a steady accumulation of evidence that turned my stomach because it was so deliberate. Ethan had untagged me from old family photographs. Brooke had referred to my father as the one who helped us build our home. A mutual acquaintance told me Ethan had introduced himself at Brooke's engagement dinner as essentially an only child. My father had told at least 2 people at his club that the house was part of what he had been able to do for the kids. He had not only accepted the lie, he had polished it. I spent one midnight alone in my real estate office, city lights reflecting in the conference room glass, documenting screenshots, copying messages, and arranging facts the way you organize evidence before a trial you never wanted to hold. Then Ethan texted me, stepping casually toward his own undoing. "Hey, random question. If we want to simplify things before the wedding, could you sign a quick claim after the honeymoon? Cleaner for future planning. Cleaner." My silence lasted 12 minutes before I replied, "Future planning for whom?" He never answered. The next morning, Brooke sent me her first direct message ever. "I would appreciate it if you didn't create stress this close to the wedding. Ethan says the paperwork has made you emotional." That was the moment something inside me quietly closed. I met with Russell Tate, a property attorney Maria trusted, in a downtown Columbus office where every surface looked designed to discourage drama. He reviewed the deed, tax records, insurance payments, and Ethan's messages. Legally, he said, setting down his glasses, your brother is an occupant, not an owner, not a beneficiary, not a tenant with rights beyond the required notice period. I asked the question that had been forming all night. If I sell it, can he stop me? Russell did not pause for even a second. No. He found a buyer faster than I anticipated, a military family relocating from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base who wanted the school district and were ready to close immediately. The sale could be recorded and completely irreversible before the wedding, while still allowing Ethan and Brooke to use the home for their their reception, after which they would receive a formal notice to vacate. Clean, legal, and only ruthless because the truth had arrived so late. The wedding was on a Saturday in June, the kind of bright Ohio summer day that makes people believe happiness comes without effort. I did not attend the ceremony. I parked 6 blocks away and listened to old jazz because silence felt too sharp. Jenna sent me updates in fragments. The wedding party arrived. The ceremony proceeded. At 5:52 in the evening, the first wave of reception guests began arriving at the house. Caterers moved through the rooms. String lights came on across the backyard I had paid to landscape. At 6:11, the wedding party's shuttle arrived. Jenna called me, speaking in a near whisper. They're here. Brooke is getting out. Your father is already at the front steps. Ethan is doing that self-satisfied smile of his. What happened next is the image that stays with me most, not because it was loud, but because it was precise. Russell's courier had timed the delivery exactly right. He stepped onto the porch just as Brooke reached the front walk, still holding her bouquet, and asked for the occupants of record to accept a legal packet. Ethan moved to wave him off with the easy arrogance of a groom on his wedding day. Brooke took the envelope instead. That single action made the entire front yard go quieter. Brides are permitted to open anything handed to them on their wedding day. No one questions it. She scanned the first page, frowned, opened the second. Jenna stopped whispering and said very softly, "Oh my God." Brooke looked up at Ethan and asked, not loudly, but clearly enough that the front half of the arriving guests could hear every word, "Who is Ava Thompson?" Nobody moved. My father stepped forward. Ethan reached for the papers. Brooke took one step back in her wedding dress, kept the envelope in her hands, and asked again, with more force this time, "Who is Ava Thompson? And why does this deed show that she owns this house?" At 6:19 in the evening, while they all stood frozen on the front walk, I sent the email. Subject line, property records. Body, the property at 114 Maple Crest Drive closed on June 14th. Attached are the recorded deeds showing my ownership, the signed sale agreement, and the formal notice to vacate within 30 days. I wish you both a long and honest marriage. 3 attachments. No emotion, no speech, no anger, just facts and deadlines and documents. Jenna texted 1 second later. Your father just checked his phone. Then, Ethan looks like he might collapse. Then, Brooke is reading the email right now. I sat in my car with both hands resting on the steering wheel, feeling neither triumphant nor broken, just absolutely still. Brooke stood on the front walk with her veil pinned back, rereading the deed, as though the words might rearrange themselves if she looked long enough. Ethan moved first for speed. "Ava's my sister," he said, too fast, already sounding guilty. "She helped us temporarily. It's complicated." My father stepped in using the voice he reserved for moments when he believed sheer volume could substitute for truth. Today is not the day for legal confusion. Brooke ignored him entirely. She looked directly at Ethan and said, "You told my parents your father helped purchase this house. You told me this house was effectively yours. You told me you had no sister close enough to invite. Why is her name on the deed?" Ethan's mouth opened and closed without producing anything useful. Brooke's mother, Margaret Harrington, reached the porch at that moment. She accepted the packet from Brooke and read enough to understand the full scope of the disaster within seconds. According to Jenna, Margaret's expression shifted from gracious social politeness to something icily composed so quickly it was almost elegant. "Reception can wait," she said. "Explanation cannot." They moved the confrontation inside to the foyer, but the open front doors and the halted flow of arriving guests meant half the reception overheard fragments regardless. "She's dramatic. That's not what happened. Dad, say something." Then Brooke repeated Ethan's exact phrase, "only for the closest family," because in his panic he had admitted he said those words to me. According to Jenna, Brooke's expression shifted at that line, not into tears, but into something much clearer. She removed the ribbon from her wrist and handed her bouquet to a bridesmaid without looking away from Ethan. "You told your own sister she was not close enough for your wedding," she said, "after she purchased this house for you." The bridesmaid didn't know where to look. My father attempted to redirect the moment into a criticism of me. "Ava has always made things theatrical," he said. Brooke did not raise her voice when she responded, which was probably exactly why it landed the way it did. "No, Richard. She made things legal. You made things shameful." At that point, Margaret assumed complete control of the room. She asked Ethan one direct question in front of everyone gathered near the entrance. 3 groomsmen, both photographers, the wedding planner, and more guests than anyone could pretend weren't listening. "Did you lie to my daughter about home ownership, your sister, and your family situation?" Ethan reached for the kind of partial admission liars attempt when full denial has already failed. "I simplified things," Margaret answered without hesitation. "Then let me simplify something for you. My daughter does not marry into fraud." Brooke still did not cry. She looked at the documents again, then at Ethan, then at my father. How many times did she ask to be included before today? Nobody answered. The silence did the answering for them. Brooke removed her wedding band, technically not yet her legal ring, simply the band Ethan had placed on her finger in the church an hour earlier, and set it on the foyer table beside the notice to vacate. Jenna told me later that you could hear the metal touch the wood from across the room. That small sound dissolved whatever remained of the illusion. The room went completely still. Even the catering staff in the kitchen stopped moving. Brooke had not left him at the altar. She had done something more final. She had remained fully present and completely clear-eyed while his entire constructed image came apart in front of everyone who mattered to him. She turned to the guests gathering in uncomfortable clusters near the entrance and said, "I'm sorry you traveled here under false pretenses. Please feel free to eat if you'd like. But before anyone raises a glass to this marriage, I want it known that the house hosting this reception belongs to the sister who was excluded from it, and that fact was deliberately hidden from me. It was not a scene. It was a disclosure. And in a family circle built on reputation and social standing, disclosure functions as a public verdict." Jenna said you could feel people mentally revisiting every conversation they had ever had with Ethan. My father's golf acquaintance, Walter, who had come through some country club connection, muttered, not softly enough, "Jesus Christ, Rich, your daughter paid for all of this." Someone nearby replied, "And you cut her out?" That exchange was the beginning of the social unraveling. Brooke's father canceled the photographer's extended package on the spot. Margaret instructed the event planner to remove all signage referring to the couple's home. Brooke canceled the honeymoon before dessert was served, calling the travel coordinator herself while still wearing her wedding dress. Then, in front of both families, she presented Ethan with 3 conditions required for there to be any marriage worth discussing by Monday. First, an ironclad postnuptial agreement drafted by her family's attorneys, separating her assets completely from every debt, claim, or family lie he had been involved in. Second, full financial disclosure, every message, every debt, every untruth connected to the house. Third, a direct and public apology to me, not filtered through my father or through Brooke or through any softened family channel. His own words, in front of people who already understood enough to know exactly what it meant. My father moved to object. Margaret stopped him with a single sentence that apparently caused even Ethan to sit down. "You are not in any position to negotiate anything tonight." The reception never found its footing again. Guests stayed long enough to collect the facts and leave with them. Some ate because the food was already plated, and people of that social circle do not leave catered food untouched out of principle. But nobody danced. The DJ stood with nothing to do for almost an hour before packing his equipment and leaving early. The best man kept his distance from Ethan entirely after learning the truth. One of Brooke's cousins openly questioned whether Ethan had misrepresented other financial matters as well. A bridesmaid asked aloud why she had never once heard my name mentioned in 2 full years of wedding planning. My father spent the evening moving between small clusters of guests, speaking with the strained authority of a man who could not understand why the room had stopped taking him seriously. Every time he said it's a family misunderstanding, someone nearby offered a version of the actual truth in return. A misunderstanding does not cost $572,000. A misunderstanding does not erase a sister. A misunderstanding does not require a formal notice to vacate. By 10:15 that night, the carefully constructed story my father had been building for years, devoted patriarch, successful son, solid family, stable home, had become a cautionary tale traveling from one conversation to the next beneath the string lights I had paid for. But the consequences did not end that evening. That night was only the opening. Within a week, the story had reached my father's country club in the form that damages men like him most effectively, quietly, with specific details. Not there was some drama at the wedding. Worse, he allowed everyone to believe he had purchased the house. His daughter paid for everything and was not even invited. The bride discovered the truth on the front steps. A retired judge declined to join my father's regular golf group, saying he had no interest in spending his Saturdays with men who erased their own daughters. A local business owner withdrew from a charity initiative my father had hoped would elevate his standing. Another told him plainly, "If you can remove your daughter from your own life story, I have no way of knowing what your word is actually worth." That statement was repeated often enough that my father stopped appearing for lunch at the club for a period of time. Men of his kind can survive cruelty when it stays private. They do not survive the public loss of credibility. Ethan's damage took a different shape. Brooke did not seek an immediate annulment, but she moved out for 3 weeks and stayed with her parents. The money set aside for the honeymoon became an attorney retainer. Her friends stopped following him online in steady waves after Brooke posted one measured, carefully worded statement that read, "The truth you discover after the wedding tells you whether you were loved or simply managed." She did not tag him. She did not need to. In their social circles, context without accusation operates as its own kind of blade. Ethan worked in marketing at a mid-sized technology company where personal reputation and professional image were inseparable. One senior client happened to know Brooke's family. Another had attended the reception. Quietly and without any formal announcement, Ethan was no longer being considered for the client-facing leadership track he had spent the spring openly discussing. Nothing disciplinary was ever documented. He was simply no longer being trusted with work that required a trustworthy face. Then came the phone calls. My father called first the following morning, furious, demanding to know what I had done. I told him I had sold my house. He said I had destroyed his son's wedding. I told him that Ethan had destroyed his own wedding the moment he built it on a foundation of lies. Then my father made the mistake of invoking my mother. "Elena would be ashamed of you," he said. I had been waiting 18 years for a sentence worth answering. "No," I told him, completely calm. "Mom would be ashamed that you made your daughter purchase her way to the edge of this family and still refused to let her through the door." He ended the call. Ethan called later, his voice broken, alternating between anger and desperate bargaining so quickly it resembled someone trying every key on a ring at a lock that would never open. He threatened legal action. I told him to proceed. He said we were family. I asked if that applied before or after he told his wife he was essentially an only child. Silence. Then what may have been genuine tears. But even then, when I asked the only question that truly mattered, sorry for what exactly, he could not say it. He could not name what he had taken, because naming the theft would also have required naming me. A week later, Russell confirmed that the legal challenge went nowhere. Ethan's own attorney reviewed the documents and communicated the truth in one sentence: "You have no claim." 30 days after the wedding, Ethan and Brooke vacated Maple Crest Drive. The new owners painted the front door a deep, rich red. Jenna sent me a photograph. I looked at it for a long time. I did not feel joy. That surprised me. I had imagined that when this moment came, it would feel like heat. Instead, it felt like an emptiness that slowly became open air, lighter but unfamiliar. In the weeks that followed, I kept waiting to feel like I had won something. I never did. What arrived first was a kind of quiet I had never experienced before. The quiet that settles in when you finally stop asking people to love you the way they always should have. I used a portion of the sale money to clear the student debt I should never have accumulated in the first place. With Maria's help, I used another portion to establish the Ava Thompson Foundation, a small fund supporting young women who lose their mothers early and must build their lives without the foundation they were meant to have. I wanted something meaningful to emerge from the last thing I ever gave to that family. Then I bought a house for myself. Nothing grand. Just a warm, simple place with a front porch and morning light coming through the kitchen windows. The deed carried one name: mine. On the first night in that house, I set my mother's photograph beside the front door and said out loud, "I finally bought a house for the right person." Ethan sent a letter months later. My father never did. Brooke reached out once, respectfully, and I appreciated that. But by then, I had already arrived at the most important understanding of my life. Healing does not always come from the people who caused the wound. Sometimes it comes from the moment you stop waiting for them to become someone different. I used to believe that family meant sacrifice. I used to believe that if I gave generously enough, stayed patient long enough, and loved deeply enough, they would eventually recognize me. I was wrong. Love that exists without respect is not family. It is simply survival. And survival is not the same as belonging. So if you have ever been treated as the spare child, the reliable one, the one expected to give indefinitely and forgive immediately, hear this clearly. Drawing a boundary is not an act of cruelty. Sometimes it is the very first honest thing you do for yourself. Money can purchase a house. It will never purchase your place in someone's heart, and sometimes the only way to truly save yourself is to stop paying the price for people who are always willing to let you go. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end.